So in this video I wanted to talk to you about my reading of Thomas Hardy so far this year as a complete actually newbie to reading Thomas Hardy. I am taking part in Jen the Librarian's read-along, where we read all of the novels of Thomas Hardy in publication order. Last month was month number 3 and we read A Pair of Blue Eyes, so I want to talk about this book. So month 2 was Under the Greenwood Tree, which I loved for all of its slowness and the nature writing in it and the romance and just that nostalgic feel of village life and days gone by. This is very much a village story centred around a village choir. I loved this one. I also loved the first read, Thomas Hardy's very first novel, Desperate Remedies, for its intrigue and its mystery and some pretty diabolical characters, which at times reminded me a little bit of a Heathcliff vibe. Really did. There were scenes in this that quite surprised me with like the kind of intrigue and the passion held within them. This book left me guessing, so I loved this. That one slightly more plot heavy than this one much more character driven, so I didn't quite know what to expect when we got to the third book that Thomas Hardy ever wrote, A Pair of Blue Eyes, which I've learnt from Jen is the first book that he wrote under his own name. I think I'm right in saying that. So what did I think of A Pair of Blue Eyes? Is this worth the read? Because it is one of the lesser popular books of Thomas Hardy. Well, to be honest, out of the 3 I've read so far, this has been my very favourite. I absolutely loved it. It left me crying at times, and it's got some shocking moments. It's got some great social commentary as well. So this book centres around the character of Elfriede Swancourt, who is a rather sheltered daughter of a parish rector. Who they live together, just the father and his daughter, and Elfriede falls in love with a very young architect who visits from London because one of the 2 churches that her father is rector at has got a crumbling tower, is beginning to crumble, and they need some plans drawn up for renovation work. And I just love the way that Elfriede's character, she's very naive, she's very young, she comes across as so young in this, really mirrors the young architect Stephen's character. I think throughout this book that mirroring of characters, mirroring in similarities or mirroring with opposites, it's a book that all the way through it sets up that dual aspect of understanding characters more, seeing them bounce off each other in certain ways. And we definitely see this at the start of the book with Elfriede and Stephen. They're both incredibly naive, they're incredibly young, they rush into things where common sense would say don't rush. They make declarations, grand declarations, too quickly. And Elfriede in particular, in her naive enthusiasm, really does overstep some social conditioning and appropriate behaviours of the time. She rushes in too quick. In a way, you can sometimes get frustrated with her character for doing that, and I can imagine a lot of people reading this book and disliking her. But to be honest, I think it was a great depiction of the foolishness of youth, really, and Stephen and Elfriede, they both mirror that with each other. So I think Hardy does great things with that mirroring of characters and writing the youth of characters. It's really good, really great writing for that. We've also got the character of Elfriede's father, who in a way he kind of deceives himself. It's kind of the opposite of rushing of youth. It's the slowing down of an elderly gentleman. He doesn't put all of the protections in place for Alfred. He lets things rumble along that shouldn't be rumbling along, shall we say. He also turns a blind eye to things, and he has it in his head, because his hobby is genealogy, that Stephen actually might be higher up in rank than he's letting on, and he just allows himself to go with the flow of that. It's kind of the lethargy of older years, and again you've got that mirroring, the two things that allow all of these circumstances at the start of the book to escalate to the point that they do. So I think there's some great character writing of Hardy here, but of course it's set against some really beautiful nature writing. The rectory that they live in looks up the hill, and you can see the crumbling church on the hill, and some of the descriptions of the wildness of that church, as opposed to the more tailored and trimmed setting of the other church that her father works at. Kind of again mirrors, the setting is mirroring. You've got one church which is wild and flamboyant and outside of social conventions, which kind of mirrors Alfred and Stephen's relationship at the start of the book, against the other church which is way more tailored, way more stoic, way more what you would expect a church to be. So there's mirroring in characters and settings too. So if you're reading this, look for that. I loved it. The wildness of the crumbling church also sets up some gothic feels throughout this, which I really wasn't expecting, and you've got some gothic recurrences later on in the book, which for me jumped out at me because I love gothic reading, and I've been reading the gothic, which I'll talk about in a little bit, which I loved as well. Totally unexpected. There is as well such a great commentary for marriage in Victorian times in this book. What happens if you don't go through the correct process for marriage? Elopements as well form part of the narrative as well in this book. You've also got Alfred's father as well chasing down a marriage of convenience. So again, you've got that marriage for love, marriage for convenience, marriage that brings shame, marriage that brings growth in social status, marriage that will drop you down the social setting as well, all interplaying with each other, again acting as foils for each other and mirrors against each other. You can kind of see how incredibly important social rank was, especially around the subject of marriage, and how controlled women were, and how the power was out of the woman's hands. Alfred in this makes some moves to get some power back. However, it's either thwarted or taken away from her, or her own internal social conditioning comes into play, and all of those aspects and the hypocrisy of older characters doing what they're telling younger characters not to do, it all comes into play and is really eye-opening for the condition of marriage within the social etiquette and the expectations of the Victorian age. It is a really fascinating book if you want to sort of delve more into what it was like to be courted, or to be scandalised, or just to become engaged and married in that era. I find that really fascinating. You've also got echoes from the past as well, kind of very shadowy figures that kind of add to aspects of the Gothic feel, if you're really going to push the envelope on what the Gothic means. In the character of Mrs. Jethaway, she's a grieving mother from the village whose son lost his life, she believes, snubbed by Alfred, and she blames Alfred for her son's death, and she often appears in the shadows as a lingering threat, as a story from the past, almost like the prophecy of a Gothic tale, coming in to just add an element of unquiet and unrest. So Mrs. Jethaway was just a fantastic part of the secrets that begin to build up in this book. It's a book where I think women are pushed to keep secrets that really they shouldn't be forced to keep, as part of keeping their standing within the expectations of men in the Victorian time. There is another love interest that comes in later in the book that Elfriede has to keep a lot secret from, because she feels like she's done unexcusable evil in the eyes of social expectations and on her new love interest expectations. She feels like fundamentally, if the truth came out, she would be a disappointment to everybody. Whereas I think, reading this as an older woman and looking at Elfriede's character, the only thing she was ever guilty of was being exuberant in youth and not being kind of guided enough for the times in her youth, and having all her power taken away. And I think that air of secrecy and the character of Mrs. Jethwaite does allow that kind of cloak of prophecy, of old stories from the past, of being haunted by old stories, to creep in, which again I think for me personally added some kind of intrigue and gothic aspect to this book. Another mirroring aspect of this book, which I thought was fascinating, was the characters portrayed through letter writing. Now, I read Emma for Jane Austen July, and I was fascinated by the letter writing in Emma, where you can watch people like fall in love and fall out of love, and whole scenarios of intrigue playing out in letters. You kind of get that in here, but it's a mirroring of letters. You learn a lot about characters in this through the letters they write. The two love interest letters are very opposing of each other, and I think with the aspect of letter writing coming in, it's used kind of as a tool for Elfriede's character to grow up. She can compare letters and writings of the two love interests and almost decide on their personalities and a course of action, and how she can look back at how much she's changed by seeing her reaction to letters. And I think that is amazing. And also letters come into play fundamentally for the plot towards the end of the book as well, again with the character of Mrs. Jethway. So letters shape the direction of the plot in this book. It gives insights into characters. It allows that mirroring of characters again, but they're really fundamental in here for plot changing. And I thought that was a great way of manoeuvring through a quite complicated plot, to do it via letters. I loved that aspect about this too. And through that letter writing, you kind of see Elfriede become less demanding and less childlike. She's quite spoilt almost, to a point where she expects everybody to adore her, everybody to love her. The letters written to her at the start of the book are all adoring. When she begins to grow up a bit, she begins to, not only in reviews of her own writing, because she is a writer in this story, and she has to take criticism and critique of her book, but also verbally and in writing she's not as pandered to, and that allows her to grow up. I think the letters in the book kind of say what you'd like to say to her, and it leads you to a point where she's talking with Mr. Knight, her second love interest, where she's trying to fish for compliments, and it just cracked me up in the book. She says, "What colour eyes do you like best, Mr. Knight?" She says this slowly. "I prefer hazel," he says serenely. She had played and lost again. That linked to the title of the book. She was fishing for a compliment for her beautiful blue eyes. "But I prefer hazel," is all that Mr. Knight will say to her. And that kind of sums up the second phase of the book. There's a lot of growing up that goes on in this book, but as she grows up and becomes more aware of social expectations, Mr. Knight also brings in a great deal of social expectations on her. You can see her crushed down by the weight of that, and she begins to feel more and more that she needs to keep the secret. And with the constant threat of Mrs. Jethway in the background, there is a crushing of spirits in this book as well, and you can see it. It's very clever the way it represents the weight of Victorian expectations on women, and what it can do to a really light-hearted, pure and initially joy-filled soul like Alfred. I think it's really cleverly done. Like, for instance, there are like some symbols, like she loses an earring at the start of the book, which is part of a quite significant scene, and you almost feel like she's lost a part of herself. It becomes like a symbol. You can read it, well, I read it anyway, as part of like a symbol of things she was losing, things that she would lose of herself if she rushed in, and they're things that she realises only as she gets older and begins to grow up more, that actually she would have, there is things of herself that she can lose and has lost. I think the earring symbolism, if you read this book for the first time, watch out for that earring symbolism. I really read that as like a symbolism of what she would lose, so it didn't come as any surprise to me when later in the book the earrings were rebought, and there's a whole fuss about rebuying a pair of earrings, and then the old earring being refound, and that being the pivotal moment where secrets are unfolded. I thought that was really clever and subtly done symbolism using objects in the book. And I said about the Gothic elements as well. White elements and white objects were used in a series of scenes over a few chapters. It gave me chills. I thought, how clever. It's all white symbols to bring in the Gothic. It's Stephen spots a white figure like a ghost running down a hillside, and then he follows a couple and he sees a white feather in the twilight, and then he goes to the ruined church and he sees the white tomb. 3 white symbols, one after the other, all set in twilight, all as the sun's setting, liminal time, liminal spaces. So making the case for the Gothic in this as well, you've got liminal settings. You've got a graveyard, a crumbling church with a graveyard on a cliff. It's all set on the cliffs on the coast. You've got scenes on cliffs as well. Read this book not only to spot the Gothic elements and the ghostly elements and recurring little symbols, but also for that liminal setting, and hold your hats on for some of the scenes. There were a couple of scenes in this that were so brilliant to read, so exciting. Rescues from cliff sides is what I'm going to say, and the most iconic scene at the top of the church tower, which I don't know if this book's ever been turned into a film, but that love scene on the tower is just so beautiful. You've got twilight coming into it and late night rendezvous at churches as well. It's just it's very Gothic. You've got a family tomb as well in there. You've got a death bell ringing. So when the white elements come in, the Gothic elements that hit you bam 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 one after the other, it's finished with the tolling through the twilight of a death bell. It doesn't get any more Gothic than that, and I loved it. And again, with the mirroring elements of the book, you've got the collapse of the church tower, which kind of signifies, I felt at the same point, the collapse of the secrets and the scaffolding of personality and reputation. again, you've got setting mirroring what's going on in the plot, what's happening internally for the characters. It's just so brilliantly done. And then of course we get to the ending of the book, which just did not see coming. There will be no spoilers, don't worry, but the ending of the book left me gasping, to be honest, and I just didn't see it coming at all, and it was, again, brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Just read it. If you've not read A Pair of Blue Eyes yet by Thomas Hardy, don't discount it because it's not as popular as, say, Far From the Madding Crowd, which is here somewhere. Here it is. This is our read for this month. I haven't started it yet, so it isn't as well known and it isn't as popular. Until this read along, I'd never even heard of it, and I've heard other people say it's not one of his best. If this isn't one of his best, it was still damn good. I loved it, I really did. Out of the 3 I've read so far, this is my favourite, and I hope that if you have read it, you will have been interested in a beginner's to Hardy take on the book. If you haven't read it yet, I hope I've enticed you to read it, because it is well worth the read, and it's just set me up with even more excitement for reading Far From the Madding Crowd, which I am about to start soon this month. So that's it, guys. That is my review, I suppose, of my reading so far with Thomas Hardy, and in particular what I thought of last month's read, A Pair of Blue Eyes. I would just show you, I did also buy some more Thomas Hardy books because I absolutely love this Macmillan Press, these editions. I just think the sort of kitsch photos of real people are so fantastic. So I have already shown a few of these editions that I have found, but I found some new ones. I found the Trumpet-Major in this edition. I found a copy of the Woodlanders in this edition, which I just think is fantastic. I love the cover of 2 on a Tower. I think that just shows the Macmillan cover editions. It's just, the covers are just so kitsch and so fabulous, and I love that pink frock. I even found the new Wessex selection of Thomas Hardy poetry in a Macmillan edition. So those are some exciting editions that I've got. Oh, and I also found Tess of the D'Urbervilles as well in that edition. Look at that cover. I think that's so fabulous. It's so unusual and it's so artistically done. I think to have all of this blank space in the image and just the interest of the photograph down this bottom corner, I love it. My 2 favourite covers from these editions are these 2. I just love it. I think this might be my all-time favourite ever book cover, but it's closely followed by this one as well. They're kitsch, they're strange, but oh, there's something I love about them. So anyway, those are books to come. I hope you enjoyed that, guys. Thank you so much for listening and watching. If you are interested, I'll put all of Jen's links for the read along and her review of A Pair of Blue Eyes, and her introduction. She's so brilliant. She's doing an introduction video for each book, and then she does a review. It's just so fantastic. And this, unlike me, isn't Jen's first time through with Thomas Hardy books, so she brings a lot more knowledge than I do. I bring my beginner's enthusiasm. That's what I can offer here. But Jen brings something different because she does know these works, so I will link Jen's videos for this book too. So go read it if you haven't read it. It's fabulous. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time. Bye.